The Galactic Military Academy's testing facility on Kronos Prime was, in a word, impressive. In several more accurate words, it was an over-engineered monument to bureaucratic excess that somehow cost 14 billion credits and still had flickering lights in the bathrooms. But hey, at least the reflex testing chamber looked expensive, which is apparently what mattered to the Admiralty Board when they approved the budget while simultaneously denying the request for better cafeteria food. Priorities, people. Priorities. Commander Vexus Thor stood in the observation deck, all four of his arms crossed in what his species considered a power pose, but what most other species considered trying way too hard. His crystalline eyes swept across the assembled cadets below, representing 47 different species from across the known galaxy. There were Xanthari with their triple-jointed limbs that bent in directions that made orthopedic surgeons weep. Krogans built like walking tanks, who probably counted as armored vehicles in some jurisdictions. Even a couple of those weird gaseous ethereals who nobody was quite sure how they even held a weapon. But they'd passed the written exams, so here they were, floating ominously and making everyone slightly uncomfortable. And then there was the human. Cadet Marcus Webb stood near the back of the group, looking remarkably unremarkable in that specifically remarkable way that humans had perfected. Average height for his species, average build, with that peculiar patch of hair on his head that humans inexplicably evolved to have in various colors and configurations. He was currently doing something with his face that the commander's cultural database identified as smiling, though whether it was genuine happiness or that bizarre human social protocol called being polite while secretly judging you remained unclear. Human facial expressions were a minefield of misinterpretation, and Vex Thor had stepped on every single mine during his first week of human cultural sensitivity training. Vexathor had been warned about humans, extensively warned. 3 months ago, they joined the Galactic Council after first contact, and already they were making waves, uncomfortable, confusing, physically improbable waves that crashed against the shores of established xenobiology with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. The reports from the diplomatic corps read less like official documentation and more like someone's fever dream written after consuming questionable space mushrooms from the restricted section of the botanical gardens. Humans, apparently, came from a death world. Not the fun kind of death world where everything was just slightly more venomous than average and made for exciting nature documentaries, but the seriously why would evolution do this kind, where the planet itself seemed personally offended by the concept of life and was determined to do something about it with extreme prejudice. Gravity that would make a beer. Krogan wheeze after climbing a single flight of stairs. Atmospheric pressure that could crush a Xanthari's thorax like a cheap party balloon. An oxygen concentration that was, according to the xenobiology reports, medically inadvisable for sustained consciousness and, frankly, irresponsible. Weather patterns that ranged from mildly apocalyptic to definitely apocalyptic, with very little middle ground. Tectonic activity that treated continental drift less like a gradual process and more like an aggressive hobby. Yet here they were, these absurd ape descendants, walking around like they owned the place, being friendly and adaptable and disturbingly good at violence when the situation called for it. They'd walk into a room, smile that unnerving smile, offer you something called coffee, which was apparently liquid anxiety in a cup, and then casually mention that their planet had mobile electrical storms that could power a small city and predators that hunted in packs using coordinated tactical strategies. And they called these predators things like Fluffy and Good Boy, and tried to domesticate them. Vex Thor had read the xenopsychology reports 3 times, looking for the punchline, before realizing that humans didn't have a punchline. They were the punchline. The entire species was a cosmic joke that somehow became self-aware and started building spaceships. "Attention, cadets," Vex Thor's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers with perhaps more aggression than was strictly necessary, but he'd been dealing with Academy bureaucracy all morning and needed an outlet. Welcome to Reflex Assessment Protocol, or as we call it, RAPE. Not the human musical genre. Cadet Webb, wipe that grin off your face. Marcus absolutely did not wipe the grin off his face. If anything, it got wider, which Vex Thor was learning was standard human behavior when told not to do something. They were contrary like that. Delightfully, annoyingly contrary. This assessment, Vex Thor continued, shooting Marcus a look that promised future push-ups, will measure your neural processing speed, physical reaction time, and combat reflexes. These are the fundamental building blocks of any successful military career. If you cannot react quickly enough, you cannot survive. Simple as that. He paused for dramatic effect, which was somewhat undermined by one of his arms accidentally hitting the microphone and creating feedback that made everyone wince. The test works as follows. You will enter the chamber, sensors will be attached to your primary motor cortex areas, and you will respond to various stimuli: visual, auditory, tactile, and combination threats. The machine will calculate your exact reflex speed down to the microsecond. The current Academy record is held by Cadet Zixtal of the Vorthan cluster at an impressive 43 milliseconds. Let's see if anyone can beat it. The cadets murmured among themselves, clearly impressed. 43 milliseconds was phenomenally fast. The average reaction time across most council species hovered around 150 to 200 milliseconds, which was perfectly respectable for beings who hadn't evolved on planets actively trying to murder them. Zixtal's record had stood for 6 years, becoming the stuff of Academy legend, whispered about in the mess hall and used as motivation during grueling training sessions. We'll go in alphabetical order by species designation, Vex Thor announced, consulting his datapad with 2 hands, while the other 2 remained crossed because he could multitask like that. Celestians first, then Draconians, Ethereals, so on and so forth. Humans will go last. Marcus raised his hand with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been intimidated by authority in his life. Question, Commander. Is there any particular reason humans go last, or is this just alphabetical spite? Several cadets laughed. One Draconian made a sound that might have been a snort or might have been the beginning of a respiratory infection. It was hard to tell with their species. Vex Thor's crystalline face managed to convey annoyance despite having no muscles to facilitate expressions, which was a talent he'd perfected over years of dealing with smart-mouth cadets. It's called protocol, Cadet Webb. Also, yes, alphabetical spite is now an official term. I'm adding it to the regulations because of you, specifically. I'm honored, sir. You shouldn't be. It's going in the section titled Things We Had to Explicitly Prohibit Because of That One Human. You're in good company with no weaponizing the food synthesizers and stop teaching the Ethereals about memes. Sir, in my defense, the Ethereals really enjoyed learning about memes. They started a philosophical movement about it, Webb. They're calling it post-digital consciousness theory. The Xenosociology department is having a collective breakdown. You're welcome, sir. Get back in line before I make you do laps around the entire facility. The testing began. One by one, cadets entered the chamber, a pristine white room with a single chair in the center, surrounded by more blinking sensors than strictly necessary. Someone in procurement clearly believed that more lights meant more science, and nobody had bothered to correct them. The Celestians went first, their luminescent forms flickering as they processed the stimuli with grace and efficiency. Decent times, mostly in the 90 to 100 millisecond range. Respectable. Solid. They exited looking pleased with themselves. The Draconians, with their predatory heritage and reflexes honed by millions of years of being apex predators, clocked in faster at 70 to 80 milliseconds. Their reptilian neurons firing with impressive efficiency that made Vex Thor nod approvingly. This was more like it. This was what he expected from military academy candidates. The ethereals were disqualified after accidentally dispersing into gas. Form when startled by a loud sound, which the machine interpreted as either 0 milliseconds or infinity, depending on how philosophical you wanted to get about the nature of existence and whether dispersing into your component molecules counted as a reaction or an existential crisis. The theology department got involved. It became a whole thing. Everyone gave them participation certificates and agreed never to speak of it again, especially not during faculty meetings. Hours passed with the relentless inevitability of bureaucratic procedures everywhere. Cadets came and went like widgets on an assembly line of assessment. The machine hummed and beeped and made all sorts of expensive noises that justified its price tag to the accountants who'd never actually seen it in operation. Scores ranged from the impressive to the "how did you even pass the entrance exam" category. A few Krogans surprised everyone by scoring in the 60-millisecond range, their combat instincts overriding their bulk. A Zenthari cadet actually managed 52 milliseconds, earning applause from the observation deck. Nobody beat Zixtal's record. Nobody even came close to that legendary 43 milliseconds. Finally, after what felt like several geological epochs compressed into a single afternoon, after Vexithor had consumed enough stimulant beverages to power a small starship, after the technicians had started taking bets on whether the human would do something weird, it was time. It was the human's turn. Marcus stood up, stretched in a way that made several vertebrae in his spine make cracking sounds that horrified the nearby Zenthari cadet who thought he was witnessing a medical emergency in progress, and walked into the chamber like he was heading to grab coffee rather than undertake a military assessment that would determine his entire career trajectory. Just casual, just vibing, just being human. "All right, Cadet Webb," Vexthor said over the intercom, his voice dripping with the kind of skepticism usually reserved for used spaceship salesmen and politicians promising tax reforms. "Let's see what humanity has to offer. And please, try not to break anything. That machine costs more than my pension, my house, and my dignity combined." "No promises, Commander." "That's what I was afraid of." The technicians approached Marcus with the sensor array, muttering among themselves in 3 different languages about human neurology being weird and not where it's supposed to be, and "are we sure this is right? Because the manual says the motor cortex should be here, but humans have it over there, and honestly, their entire brain layout is offensive to my understanding of biology." Humans, it turned out, had moved several important brain structures to different locations than the standard galactic model. Because of course they had. Why would humans do anything the normal way? That would be too simple. Eventually, the technicians shrugged collectively and decided that close. Enough was good enough, which is basically the unofficial motto of military technicians everywhere across the galaxy. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, hit it with a wrench and see what happens. Beginning assessment in 3, 2, 1. Mark. The first stimulus hit. A light flashed in Marcus's peripheral vision, sudden and bright. The machine recorded his response time with microsecond precision. 4 milliseconds. Vexithor blinked all 3 of his eyelids in sequence, which was his species equivalent of a spit take. That had to be a sensor error. Had to be. There was no other explanation. He checked the readings again, pulling them up on 3 different screens because surely one of them would tell him something different. No error. 4 milliseconds from stimulus to motor response. That was impossible. That violated several known principles of neurology that Vexthor had learned in Academy decades ago. Neural signals didn't travel that fast. Brains didn't process information that quickly. Physics didn't work that way. The second stimulus came, a sound, sudden and sharp, the kind of noise that triggered prey instincts across a dozen species. Marcus's hand moved to intercept an imaginary threat with precision that looked choreographed. 3 milliseconds. "What the?" Vexthor started, then caught himself because he was a professional, and professionals didn't swear in front of cadets even when confronted with biologically impossible data. Technician Krell, run a full diagnostic on the sensors. Something's wrong with the calibration. Already running it, sir, Krell replied, her tentacles flying across the control panel like a concert pianist having a seizure. Sensors are reading normal, no errors detected. Calibration is perfect. The machine is functioning exactly as designed. Then explain to me how a human is responding faster than neural signals can travel. I can't, sir. That's above my pay grade. That's above everyone's pay grade. That might be above the pay grade of theoretical physicists. The test continued. Visual stimuli, auditory stimuli, tactile stimuli, combinations thereof designed to confuse and overwhelm. Each time Marcus responded faster than should be biologically possible. 5 milliseconds, 2 milliseconds, 6 milliseconds, 1.8 milliseconds. The numbers bounced around in the single digits like they were having a party, and nobody had told the laws of physics they weren't invited. The observation deck had gone completely silent except for the sound of Technician Krell's tentacles hammering the keyboard and someone's drink container hitting the floor in shock. Then came the combat simulation, the true test that separated the competent from the exceptional. The chamber reconfigured, hard light projectors humming to life and creating hostile targets that cadets had to react to and neutralize. This was where combat instincts met reflexes, where training met natural ability. Most cadets struggled here, their times dropping significantly when they had to process threats and make decisions. The simulation began. Marcus moved. Later, when reviewing the footage frame by frame and then frame by frame again because nobody believed the first analysis, Vexthor would describe it as concerning. The more poetic observers in the xenobiology department called it a beautiful disaster of biological efficiency. The machine simply called it error, response time negative. Does not compute. Please send help. Marcus didn't just react to the threats. He reacted before the machine finished rendering them. His hands were already moving to intercept projectiles that hadn't finished spawning into existence. He was dodging attacks that the simulation was still calculating trajectories for. It was like watching someone fight a very slow ghost if the ghost was also very confused about temporal causality and considering a career change. The chamber filled with the sounds of hard light constructs being demolished with extreme prejudice and efficiency. Marcus moved through the simulation like water, or possibly like a caffeinated mongoose, all controlled aggression and impossible reflexes wrapped in a package that looked deceptively casual. At one point, he caught a simulated blade between his palms in a move that the database initially identified as anime protagonist nonsense, before someone had updated it to say, apparently, just human nonsense, and then updated it again to say, why are they like this? 15 seconds later, the simulation ended. Not because Marcus had completed it, but because he'd neutralized all threats so quickly that the machine had run out of things to throw at him and was now just making confused beeping sounds that roughly translated to, "What just happened and can I file for early retirement?" Marcus stood in the center of the chamber, slightly sweaty but otherwise unbothered, breathing normally despite exertion that should have left him winded, and called out with that infuriating human casualness, "Was that fast enough?" The observation deck was silent. 46 cadets from 46 different species and one commander who'd seen everything in his 30 years of service but had apparently not seen this, all stared at the readouts in various states of disbelief, confusion, and existential crisis about their chosen career paths. Vexthor slowly approached the main console, his legs feeling slightly unsteady, where Technician Krell was frantically trying to make sense of the data while muttering in her native language about finding a new job in a less stressful field, like explosive ordnance disposal. "Give me the final calculation," he said quietly. Krell's tentacles trembled. Sir, I don't think you're going to believe this. Try me. At this point, I'm ready to believe humans are actually from another dimension and just pretending to be normal spacefaring mammals as some kind of elaborate prank on the rest of us. Average response. Time across all stimuli. -2 milliseconds. Silence. Negative. Yes, sir. -2 milliseconds. The machine is claiming he responded 2 milliseconds before the stimuli occurred, sir. Vex Thor stared at the screen, then at Marcus, who was waving cheerfully through the observation window like he hadn't just violated causality. Then back at the screen, then at the ceiling as if divine intervention might provide answers. That's not physically possible. Correct, sir. That would require precognition, time travel, or some kind of quantum nonsense that I don't understand. Also correct, sir. We don't believe in precognition. We definitely don't have time travel, and quantum mechanics stays in the physics department where it belongs. Apparently, the human didn't get any of those memos, sir. Before Vex Thor could formulate a response that wouldn't result in him being committed to the medical bay for stress-induced crystalline fractures, the machine made a sound that technology should not make. It was somewhere between a wheeze, a grinding noise, what could only be described as electronic sobbing, and possibly a cry for help in binary. Then it started smoking. Not the minor technical issue kind of smoke. The something fundamental has broken kind of smoke. The call maintenance and possibly the fire department kind of smoke. Said Technician Krell with impressive understatement. That's not good, added Technician Voss, master of stating the obvious. The machine emitted one final pitiful beep that sounded almost pleading, displayed the message, "I quit, I am done. Goodbye, cruel world." On its main screen in letters that seemed somehow dejected, and died. Just died. Gave up. 14 billion credits worth of cutting-edge technology looked at the data it had just collected, decided that reality was optional and it didn't like this version anyway, and gave up on existence entirely. Somewhere in the budget office, an accountant felt a disturbance in the financial reports and began weeping without knowing why. The observation deck erupted in chaos. Technicians scrambled to save the data, rushing around like their jobs depended on it, which they probably did. Cadets were shouting questions in 47 different languages. Someone fainted, though nobody was quite sure why or who it was. An ethereal started vibrating at frequencies that set off 3 different alarm systems. Marcus, still in the chamber, knocked politely on the window like a reasonable person asking for directions. "Hey, am I done? Can I leave now? I've got lunch plans and the mess hall closes in 20 minutes. Vex Thor pressed the intercom button with more force than necessary, possibly denting it slightly. "Stay right there, Cadet. Don't move. Don't breathe heavily. Don't do anything that might be considered existing too aggressively." "Sir, I kind of have to breathe. It's a biological necessity for my species." "Fine. Breathe. But do it. Slowly. Predictably. Like a normal person." "I am a normal person, sir." "Cadet Webb, you just caused a military-grade reflex testing machine to have what I can only describe as a mechanical nervous breakdown, followed by what appears to be machine suicide. Normal is no longer a word I can apply to you in good conscience or any conscience." The door to the observation deck burst open with dramatic timing. In strode Captain Kelvan, the Academy's head of xenobiology studies, looking like someone who just sprinted from the other side of the facility after receiving an emergency alert about impossible biological data and humans doing human things again. Her scales were flushed with excitement, her breathing rapid, and she was waving a datapad like it contained the secrets of the universe, which, given what had just happened, it might actually contain at least one secret. "Commander Vexithor, I need to speak with you about the human immediately," she said, breathless and practically vibrating with scientific enthusiasm. "Captain, unless you're here to explain how that cadet broke my machine, violated causality, and ruined my entire afternoon, I'm really not in the mood for... That's exactly why I'm here. She shoved the datapad into his hands with perhaps more force than was academically professional. I've been reviewing human neurology since they joined the council. Do you know how human reflexes actually works? Apparently not as well as I thought, considering one of them just achieved negative response times and caused equipment failure through the sheer audacity of his nervous system. Human brains process threats through something called the amygdala, which triggers what they call a fight or flight response before the conscious mind even registers danger. It's an evolutionary adaptation from their death world where everything wanted to eat them. But here's the fascinating part, the really beautiful part. Her eyes were gleaming with that special light that scientists get when they discover something that makes them question their entire understanding of biology. They also have something called predictive processing. Their brains are constantly running simulations of their environment, predicting what's about to happen before it happens. When a predicted event matches reality, they've essentially already responded to it neurologically. The motor cortex has already fired. The response is already in progress. Vex Thor looked at the datapad, scanning through research papers and neurological scans that made his head hurt. Then at Marcus, who was now doing what appeared to be stretches. Then back at the datapad. Then at the ceiling again, because at this point, why not? You're telling me humans are accidentally precognitive? Not precognitive, predictive. There's a crucial difference. They're not seeing the future. They're extremely good at guessing it based on millions of years of evolution in an environment where failing to guess correctly meant becoming lunch for something with more teeth than seemed necessary. Their brains are so paranoid about survival that they're always ready for the worst-case scenario. When you grow up on a planet where the weather can kill you, the animals can kill you, the plants can kill you, and sometimes the ground itself opens up and it tries to kill you. You develop really good threat prediction. Add in their faster-than-average neural conductivity due to their high-pressure, high-oxygen environment, and you get reflexes that appear to violate causality. They appear to violate causality because the machine said he responded before the stimulus occurred. That's the definition of violating causality, Captain. Captain Kelvan grinned, showing all her teeth in a display that would have been threatening if she weren't so excited. Exactly. Beautiful, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful. The machine measures from when it sends the stimulus signal to when it detects the motor response. But if his brain predicted the stimulus accurately based on pattern recognition and environmental cues, and he was already moving before the machine finished sending the signal, then from the machine's perspective, he reacted before the event. His neurons were firing before the machine registered that it had sent the signal. It's not time travel. It's just really good guessing combined with obscenely fast neural processing. That's insane. That's humanity, Commander. That's what happens when you evolve on a planet that's actively hostile to life. You get really good at not dying, or you stop existing, and humans got very good at not dying. Down in the chamber, Marcus had gotten bored with waiting and was now doing what appeared to be one-armed push-ups. Because of course he was. Humans couldn't just stand still. They had to be doing something, always moving, always active, like they were personally offended by the concept of rest. Vex Thor made a decision. A decision that he would later describe as either brilliant or career-ending, depending on how the next few hours went, and whether the Admiralty Board had a sense of humor. He pressed the intercom button, which was definitely dented now. All cadets, report to Briefing Room 7 immediately. Cadet Webb, stop exercising and get up here before you accidentally break something else through the sheer power of being human. 10 minutes later, the entire cohort was assembled in a briefing room that suddenly felt much smaller with 47 confused cadets crammed into it. Marcus stood at the front next to Vex Thor, looking confused but game for whatever was happening, which seemed to be his default state of existence. Vex Thor paced back and forth, his forearms gesticulating as he spoke, which made him look like he was conducting an orchestra of chaos. I'm going to be honest with all of you. Brutally, painfully honest. What we just witnessed was unprecedented in the Academy's 200 years history. Cadet Webb has either broken our understanding of neurology, broken a 14 billion credit machine, broken the laws of physics, or all three. Probably all three. Definitely all three, if I'm being realistic. Marcus raised his hand with the casual confidence of someone who'd never been intimidated by authority in his entire life. Sir, I really didn't mean to. Shut up, Webb. I'm having a moment of existential crisis here, and you're going to let me have it. Vex Thor continued pacing, his crystalline feet clicking against the floor. This presents us with a problem. Multiple problems. A whole cascade of problems that I'm going to have to solve before dinner. The reflex test is a critical component of Academy training. We use it to determine combat assignments, pilot qualifications, special operations eligibility, and hazard pay calculations. We can't just throw it out because one human decided to evolve weird. Sir, all humans can do this, Marcus interjected, dropping information like a bomb into an already explosive situation. It's not just me. It's kind of standard for us. The room went very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens right before something very loud, like an explosion or a revelation that changes everything. All humans, Vex Thor repeated slowly, his voice dangerously calm. Yeah. I mean, I'm probably a bit faster than average. I played a lot of video games as a kid, which apparently trains reaction time. Did some athletics in school, ran track, played some sports that involved catching things moving at high speeds. But any human could probably score in the single-digit milliseconds on your test. Some might hit double digits if they're tired or distracted. It's just how we're built, sir. Standard equipment. Captain Kelvan was frantically taking notes, making excited chittering sounds that her translator couldn't quite process into coherent language. Vexithor sat down heavily, which was notable because he'd been standing for the past 3 hours, straight out of pure stubbornness and military bearing. Cadet Webb, do you understand what this means? Do you comprehend the implications of what you just told me? That I'm going to be really popular in the pilot program? It means that humans are going to revolutionize Council military doctrine. It means every combat simulation, every tactical manual, every training protocol, every piece of equipment designed in the last 2 centuries is going to need revision to account for your species. It means... He paused, a strange expression crossing his crystalline features, something between awe and horror. It means we need to order new reflex testing machines, plural, many plural, and design them specifically to handle you people and your ridiculous nervous systems. Will they cost 14 billion credits each, sir? Probably more now, thanks to inflation, hazard pay for the engineers who have to design equipment for humans, and the fact that we'll need to build in redundancies for when you inevitably break those too. Marcus grinned that infuriating human grin. So, did I pass? Vexithor pulled up the destroyed machine's final data log, which had been recovered by technicians who deserved medals and therapy. There, amidst the error messages and what appeared to be digital screaming and a plea to make it stop, was a single confirmed statistic. Cadet Marcus Webb, human, average response time. -2 milliseconds, overall assessment score. 997 out of a possible 100 points. The scoring system had broken so badly, it had awarded points that mathematically shouldn't exist. The commander looked at that score for a long moment, feeling something inside him that might have been his sanity finally giving up. You know what, Webb? Sure. You passed. You passed so hard, you broke the grading system, shattered the curve, and probably traumatized the machine's AI into having an existential crisis. I'm giving you a special designation, Human Standard. Everyone else will be graded on their own species bell curve because comparing anyone to you would be cruel and unusual punishment. You people get your own category because apparently the universe wasn't weird enough already. and decided to throw in a species that casually violates established neurological principles. The other cadets burst into conversation, some excited about the implications, some concerned about having to compete with humans, all confused about how this had become their afternoon. Marcus just stood there, looking pleased with himself in that particularly human way that suggested he knew exactly how much chaos he'd just caused, and was perfectly fine with it, possibly even proud of it. As the briefing dissolved into controlled pandemonium, Vexthor pulled Marcus aside to a corner of the room. "Webb, off the record, between you and me, I need to know something." "Sir, were you actually trying during that test? Full effort?" Marcus's expression became carefully neutral in the way that meant he was about to say something that would make Vexthor's day worse. "Define trying, sir." "Don't play games with me, Cadet. I've had a very long day, and my crystalline structure can only take so much stress before I start developing fractures." The human's grin returned, slightly sheepish this time, like a child caught with their hand in the cookie jar. "Okay, full honesty, I was at maybe 70%, 75 tops. Didn't want to seem like I was showing off or making the other cadets feel bad. Seemed rude." Vexithor's crystalline face managed to convey an emotion that transcended species barriers, cultural differences, and even dimensional boundaries. The universal expression of someone who has just realized they've made a terrible mistake. It's far too late to fix it, and they're going to have to live with the consequences for a very long time. 70%, he repeated, his voice hollow. "Yes, sir? Maybe 75. If I'm being generous with the estimate. I figured going full out might seem disrespectful to the other cadets. You know, like rubbing it in their faces. You broke a 14 billion credit machine at 70% effort. In my defense, sir, that seems like a design flaw in the machine. If it can't handle standard human performance, that's really more of a procurement issue than a me issue." Vexthor laughed. He couldn't help it. It came out as a crystalline chiming sound that made everyone in the room turn to stare in shock because Commander Vexthor never laughed. Never. It was against his personal code. But here he was, laughing at the absurdity of it all, at the universe's cosmic joke, at the fact that humanity had waltzed into galactic civilization and immediately started breaking things by simply existing. "Get out of here, Webb. Go have lunch. Terrorize the mess hall with your impossible biology. I need to go explain to the Admiralty Board why they need to allocate approximately 60 billion credits for new testing equipment that can handle humans without having mechanical breakdowns." "Good luck with that, sir." "I'm going to need it. I'm going to need so much luck that I might have to start believing in whatever gods humans worship just to improve my odds." As Marcus left, giving a casual wave to his fellow cadets who were looking at him with a mixture of awe and fear, Vexthor turned to Captain Kelvan, who was still scribbling notes with 4 different writing implements simultaneously, her scientific enthusiasm entirely undimmed. "Captain, please tell me humans have some kind of weakness we can document. Something that makes them less terrifying. Anything, I'm begging you." She looked up, her eyes gleaming with scientific fervor and possibly mild mania. "Well, they do have an amusing tendency to adopt dangerous predators as pets and call them cute names. They also form emotional attachments to small, helpless creatures and will risk their lives to protect them. Oh, and they have this thing called spite that makes them accomplish impossible tasks just to prove someone wrong. That doesn't make them less terrifying, Captain. That makes them significantly more terrifying. That makes them nightmare fuel." "Oh? Yes, I suppose you're right. Would it help if I mentioned they also cry at emotional stories and make art about their feelings?" "Not particularly. No." Commander Vexthor looked out the window at the academy grounds, where Cadet Webb was now jogging casually across the quad toward the mess hall, probably still at some fraction of his actual capability. Probably not even breathing hard, despite the atmospheric composition that should make extended exercise difficult for his species. Probably thinking about what sandwich he wanted for lunch, while the entire command structure tried to figure out how to integrate his species into military protocols. The galaxy had gotten a lot more interesting 3 months ago when humans joined the Council. And now, watching one human cadet revolutionize military assessment protocols by simply existing at his natural capacity while holding back so as not to be rude, Vexthor realized something profound. Humanity wasn't just going to be part of the Galactic Council. They were going to change everything, every assumption, every standard, every comfortable certainty about how things worked. And they were going to do it with that infuriating combination of genuine friendliness, casual competence, and absolutely terrifying capability that seemed to be their species' defining characteristic. The commander made a note in his personal log. Adjust all future assessments for human baseline capabilities. Create separate testing standards. Also, invest in therapy. Going to need substantial therapy. Possibly for the rest of my career. He paused, then added, note to self, never ask a human if they're trying their hardest. The answer will only make things worse. Somewhere across the galaxy, in the archives of the Galactic Military Academy, a new record was filed. It would stand unchallenged for years to come, not because no human could beat it, but because they'd eventually